Welcome to the Supported Living Property Podcast with your host, me, Lisa Brown, the place to learn about supported living property investing. Hi, David. It's great to have you here. Thank you for joining me. For people who don't know who you are, will you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. And thank you for inviting me as well today. I do appreciate it. Yeah, so I'm David Abbey, Director of My Safe Home. And what we do is we arrange mortgages for people with long-term disabilities who typically have only got state disability benefits to live on.
I love it. It's brilliant already. I'm so excited about this episode because it's something I get asked about quite a lot, or not asked about. People assume it can't be done. And I think that's what's so brilliant about what you guys are doing. So talk to me about My Safe Home, about its background, how long it's been going for.
Right, so My Safe Home was created on the back of some great work from people way before me. You know, when we talk about the work of My Safe Home, we're standing on the shoulder of giants and people that you might even know: Alicia Wood, Jane Knight, Maurice Harker, Nigel King. These people were doing this stuff that we're talking about way before I came into the marketplace in '97. I was invited by Nigel and Maurice because they'd written a book called Home Ownership for people with learning disabilities, and they wanted to find a mortgage model that would enable parents to help their sons and daughters to achieve security by buying their own home. And luckily enough, I was invited to help what is Homes England now, but back then used to be the Housing Corporation. Probably not old enough to know about the Housing Corporation, Lisa. So this was way back in '97,
Yeah.
and the model was born from there. So we created the model on the back of parents saying they wanted an option apart from just renting and residential care back in those days, and they wanted their option to be available for people who've got long-term disabilities and who probably would only ever have state disability benefits to live on for the whole of their lives. And that's what we do. We arrange mortgages for those individuals. Won't be right for everybody. We're not suggesting everybody with long-term disability should buy their own home, but we passionately believe it should be an option that's available in all areas of the country.
And that's really important, isn't it? Because for a lot of people, there's that insecurity, isn't there, about not having, what happens to my son or daughter, perhaps when I'm not around anymore? How do I ensure that this property is theirs? They're going to stay there, not just going to be evicted tomorrow. All of those concerns that all of us have, but particularly people who've got children with a disability, or they're supporting family members with a disability. So it's a really, really useful option for people to know about. And I don't think it's talked about enough, David. I think it's something that, people don't understand. So I'm really pleased you're here to help us understand it. So when we were talking before, you were sort of explaining that there are two different models that can be used. Talk about those different models for us.
Yeah, so we arrange these specialist mortgages for people, okay, and the two models that these mortgages can access is really around. The first one is shared ownership. So shared ownership are properties typically brand new, built for people. It's affordable housing. It's grant funded affordable housing, and they're built for people who are earning up to sort of 80 or 90,000 pounds per annum. And they're affordable homes. So these are available in most areas of the country, and you'll see them on brand new sites, etc. And it means that the property is already built, so you can go in and have a look, make sure it's the right location, right property, and enables the person who's buying to buy a share of that property and pay rent on the balance. So that's what we mean by shared ownership: part buy, part rent. Brand new, already built. So our mortgages can do that. And don't be surprised about the quality of the property. Some of these properties are worth 300, 400, 500,000 pounds, and they're affordable and sustainable and for people with long-term disabilities. So that's the first model, and those are all available all around the country. The second model that these specialist mortgages can support is something called HOLD. And that stands for Home Ownership for People with Long-term Disabilities. And that's the model that we helped to develop back in '97. And this model is a little bit different in the sense that these properties aren't shared ownership. They're an ordinary house, an ordinary street, and you go and find one. So the person with a disability, along with their family or the circle of support, can point to a property on Rightmove or any other estate agency platform, and then the housing association buys the whole of that property off whoever's living there. The day they buy the whole of that property from whoever's living there, they then sell a share onto our applicant, who's a person with a long-term disability. And so they buy part, and they pay rent on the balance. And so it becomes part buy, part rent, but it wasn't that to begin with. And that gives people real choice about where they live. Some people choose to live around the corner from parents. Others decide they want to live right over the other side of town. That's their choice. So it gives them real choice and the type of property. So we know some people want property that's fairly rural sometimes because of noise sensitivity. Others will need a bungalow. Others want a garden. Others don't want a garden, want an apartment. So you've got all those choices. So hold is the second model that the mortgages support.
So let's talk about the shared ownership one in a bit more detail for people, because I think people are familiar with that idea of shared ownership. It's something that we know about, but I think, well, I had never considered it of being accessible for people who were on benefits in the way that you talked about when we were talking earlier, David. So tell us how do you find out about it? How do you access this?
Right. So shared ownership properties, several websites you can go to find those. London has its own specific one, Homes for Londoners and all sorts of stuff. But the one that's for most of the country is sharetobuy.com. So sharetobuy.com, and that's TOBUY, sharetobuy.com. And you just put the area that you're looking at. You can spread out in radius terms, and you can see what's available in terms of brand new properties. So they've not been lived in by anybody, and others where they have been lived in and they're now being sold. So somebody might have bought a shared ownership property 5, 10, 15 years ago. They now want to move, so they sell that property, and you'll see those labeled as resales. So that's what they mean by resales, the second-hand properties. And the difference between the two in terms of how much you can purchase is with a brand new property, sometimes they're advertised at 50 or 60% share. You can actually purchase a lower share than that on a brand new property. With a resale, you can only buy the share that the previous owner purchased 5, 10, 15 years ago. So some of those might be advertised at 50, 60, 70%. You have to pay then. You have to buy that share. With new
Right.
build, you got that flexibility. So those are available all around the country. If we could work through an example now, and you could see one how it works, etc. So
Let's do that, shall we? Because I think it's really useful for people to see that as an illustration. So we're just going to open the website for those on the podcast. We are going to open this. So I think David's going to share his screen, and we're just going to have a look at it. We'll describe what we're looking at on the website for you, but obviously you can also access this on YouTube if you want to sort of see what David's actually doing on the site. So David's just sharing his screen at the moment.
So I'll just take this a step back, then you can see where we started. So just going back to results.
And I was really surprised by just how many results came up. We did a search in the Southwest, and David put in Exeter as a search. And then I think you restricted this to just houses, not flats. And we still got 32 properties come up. So that's a huge number. I was really expecting to find one or two, to be honest.
And just building on that, Lisa, just bear in mind what the search I've put in here are for brand new houses. So although you've got 32 properties on screen, you might actually find some sites have got 20 or 30 of these properties on them. So it could be hundreds rather than just the 32 on screen. So these are already built by housing associations and registered providers, and I say 5 Mile Ride of Exeter. So and you can just scroll down those to until you find a suitable property. And most families will know where these properties are if they live in the area. Okay, so I'm just looking at one here. This is Places for People. That's the provider. They're very well known around the country.
They're a big housing association, aren't they? Places for People.
Absolutely, and most of these are because they'll have got grants from the government of perhaps millions of pounds to build these properties. So this is a property here at New Court Edge in Exeter. It's a 3-bedroom, and our applicants can have 2 or 3 bedroom solutions if that's what they need, especially with complex needs, etc. And this property is worth £399,500. Okay,
and this looks like a really nice 3-bed semi-detached house, doesn't it?
If we just click on the address, here it is. So you could see it's so let's be really clear. This one's under offer, so you could tell how attractive it is. So this one's under offer, but so these properties are available to people, as I say, who earn, it's outside of London, who earn up to £80,000 a year. Okay.
Which is most of the population in the Southwest.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And our mortgages are enabling people with complex needs and disabilities to be on the same level of as those individuals in terms of buying power effectively. So this is up, so here's a £400,000 property virtually, and by 25% share for just under 100,000, you've got 99,000 there. And the first thing to bear in mind with these properties is it's affordable homes. It's been grant funded. So there's a rent element on that, okay? And on here, I'm just going to move down a little bit on here. So the rent on this property, if you buy quarter share, is £624 a month. And
So
that's for a
you would be
property.
paying, if you were buying this property, you would be expected to pay the rent element and your mortgage element.
Correct, absolutely. So just the rent element alone is 624, and there's a service charge there. And then you can see that's £55 a month, okay?
Right.
That rent and service charge is fully paid for by housing benefit.
So how would I pay for the mortgage element of
Right,
it?
so you can see that showing a mortgage figure of just over £550 a month, okay? The specialist mortgages that we arrange are of a smaller payment level than that, okay? But on top of that, the mortgage is also subsidised by the government.
Right.
So for £100,000 mortgage, which is the maximum mortgage that we can arrange for people with long-term disabilities and have it be affordable and sustainable for the whole of their mortgage term, they would pay about £40 a week towards their mortgage.
Right.
So
Wow.
that £40 a week would come out of their disability benefits, you know, ESA, Universal Credit, PIP, all those types of
Mhm.
things, and that's their payment towards that mortgage. And obviously, they've got to pay for the heating, lighting, food, etc., because they're living in their own home. But in
Yeah.
terms of mortgage element, it's affordable.
And that opens up a lot of properties to people, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And these
Yeah.
are, and again, let's not be shy about these. These are brand new properties worth £400,000 or £500,000. So that is, you know, that is not, you know, having a look at a, you know, a bed sit in a property that's got, you know, 4 or 5 other people in. This is, and this won't be right for everybody, as I said at the very beginning. But to
No.
access this, to access that property, the bank of mum and dad or savings will need to find about £15,000 in capital as a deposit and for the fees to purchase that property on that
Right.
arrangement at 25% share.
So there's an element of an upfront amount of about £15,000 to secure that property. And then the rest of it would be funded out of benefits.
Absolutely,
So it
absolutely.
does make it affordable for a lot of people. I know that's still a big deposit to find
Yes,
for
it is.
some people, but that is it is more affordable than other options, isn't it? And it gives you then that security that this is so that home, that person would have their name on the deeds for this property.
Correct,
This would
absolutely,
be
just
there.
like you and I would have. But
Yeah,
the difference here is they don't own £400,000 worth of property. They only own £100,000 worth of property. That's the difference between it. But
yeah,
people have told me from 27 years ago, it's never been about property price inflation. They don't want their sons and daughters to be property millionaires. It's all about security of tenure, who you live with, where you live, and having real choice. Having
yeah,
real choice, you know, and that's
yeah,
what this is about. And what parents like about this model is the fact that their sons and daughters can live around the corner from them in an area where they
yeah,
feel safe. And
yeah.
they can see their sons and daughters settled with good lives,
Mm,
and they get to choose the care provider. We only provide the keys to people's houses. We don't
yeah.
do care. That's not what we do. We get
No,
the keys in people's hands so they can open the front door. Now they can have a care provider of their choice. And if they don't get on with the care provider for any reason, they can change the care provider and they keep their home. It's their home. It's their name on the deeds. Yeah.
and that's their
And, and,
home for life,
and
maybe.
interestingly, you know, we've been doing this for a number of years, I say 25 years. And in those early years, we had lots of very good providers, but typically very small, who didn't have the resources perhaps to build their own accommodation or to buy their own accommodation. And they like this. And we've got
Mm,
families who have kept that provider for 25 years. So, you know, we know that if providers can help families make settled arrangements for their family members and they're good providers, they'll keep that relationship going for as long as the person needs care, you know. And
yeah,
so that
that's brilliant.
and they have to be confident in their ability, because they can, you know, if it doesn't work, you know, they you know, it's the person with it's the homeowner who has who has the control, if you like, and that frightens some of the care providers, perhaps the larger ones.
But it is the way it should be, really, isn't it? David, do you mind stopping screen sharing and we'll carry on talking? Thank you for illustrating that to people. So
Okay.
that's the Share to Buy website for people to have a look at. What else about that shared ownership? Are there any other positives or negatives that we need to talk about?
Yeah, there are some negatives actually. We need to pick up on that. So with shared ownership, even though you own a quarter share of that property, you are responsible as a homeowner for all the major repairs and maintenance of that property for as long as you live there. So let's give an
Right.
example. They're brand new properties, as you'd like to think, they're going to be all right for the next 20 years or whatever
They
it is.
should have a warranty with them to
Absolutely,
start
you
with,
get all
shouldn't
your
they, as
you get
well?
all your new build warranties all in place. So let's imagine you've been living in the property for 30 years or 25 years, and the roof needs replacing. I don't know how much a new roof costs. Let's say £20,000. So if the roof needs to be replaced at £20,000, you as the homeowner have to find the full cost of that roof
Right.
replacement, even though you only own a quarter of the property. So that's
Okay.
the negative side of shared ownership.
Right. Yeah.
And the rent is a controlled rent, so that's positive. So we saw the rent was reasonable, at
Yeah.
£600 a month or whatever it was. So the landlord kind of said, well, things have gone up a little bit more than we expected this last year or two, so we're going to put another 20% on that. Because it's
Right.
government funded, it's government controlled rent. So that rent is a calculated rent, and it can only increase by inflation plus 1% per annum.
Okay.
So, and that's the reason that people say, well, oh, I'm in a rented property currently, yet housing benefit caps my rent. With this, because it's an affordable housing solution of home ownership, it's paid. The bit
Right.
that you might have to pay sometimes in some local authorities is your buildings insurance, and that might be, I don't know, £5, £6, £7, £8 a week or something, but
Yeah.
most of the rent and service charge is covered by housing benefit. So those are some of the pluses and the big plus on this compared to hold, and we can talk about hold in a moment. The big plus on this is you could access a £400,000 property for startup fees of about £15,000. So that's good. That's good.
Really good. Really good. And I think it's a really good option also for care providers listening who are supporting people who maybe are in inappropriate housing at the moment, to think actually this could be a way to help them access the right properties. So yeah, thank you for explaining that. And I was surprised by just how many properties there were available. And you're saying that's mirrored all around the country when you do those searches. So yeah, that's really interesting, because accessing property is such a challenge for people at the moment. So that is really good to see. So the other model that you set up for people is the hold scheme, and that's the one that I actually approached you about. That's the one I was more familiar with. But tell us what that is and how that works.
Right. So the difference between shared ownership and hold is shared ownership. It's the same type of model. Okay. However, these properties don't exist. I can't show you the hold properties available right now. Okay. And the reason for that is the model's based on an ordinary house on an ordinary street for sale through an estate agent.
Right.
So for
Okay.
that reason, it's down to the individual with their circle of support to point to a property that's going to be suitable for them, be that a bungalow, a flat, a house, how close it is to friends and family, where it is, and then once they've pointed to that property, a housing association purchases the whole property of whoever's selling it.
Right. Okay.
And that property could be 30 years old, 50 years old, 60 years old, could be brand new. So you've got all of those ranges in between. So the housing association will purchase it. To enable them to purchase it, they'll get some grant from the government, okay? And they'll put some money in it themselves. But typically, we're looking at the southwest there, Exeter, typically for Exeter, that might be £140,000 as a cash input into that property. So
By that housing association.
by that housing association, that's correct. And the maximum mortgage that we can put in, that we can arrange for people with long-term disabilities and make it affordable and sustainable for the length of term of the mortgage, is 100,000. So when you look at a property just like we've just seen at £400,000, we know it's 140 from the housing association. The maximum mortgage is 100. That makes it £240,000 towards a property of 400,000. So that means there's £160,000 shortfall, and that needs to come from somewhere. And that's
Right.
typically
Okay.
the bank of mom and dad. So to access that same property on, let's say, Barrett's site, that's just an ordinary house, an ordinary street anybody can buy rather than shared ownership, you'd need £160,000 on the hold model.
Wow, and that puts it out of reach for most people, doesn't it? You know, very
Correct.
few people have got that kind of deposit available to put forward
Okay.
for that.
But on a
Um,
positive note, though, with that model, on a
mm,
positive note, you get real choice about where you live and the type of property. So we have some people say it has to be a bungalow, David, because, and it has to be fairly rural because of noise,
yeah,
noise impact and all
yeah,
the rest of it. So with hold, you could find one of those properties. With shared ownership, you wouldn't find a bungalow. Very
no,
rare. There might be in the whole of England 24 bungalows for sale on shared ownership.
yeah.
So you
So the
wouldn't find
chances
that.
of that being
Yeah,
in your area where
that's
you
right.
need,
Absolutely. You got all
yeah,
that. So you get more choice. And also with the hold model, and this took a little while to get through to arrange with the government back in 97, because it could be a second-hand property, 50 years old.
mm.
We worried about the major repairs and
I was
maintenance,
going
that
to
somebody
ask,
could
yeah,
move in 5 years down the road, the roof needs replacing. Where does somebody who's
mm,
only got state disability benefits to live on find £20,000 to replace the roof?
yeah,
So with hold, the government allows the housing association to have a service charge that's calculated on the age of the property, the size of the property, and the condition of the property, and again very controlled, and then that will be added to the rent and also be covered by housing benefit. So let's take that same example again, £20,000 to replace the roof. With hold, the whole of the £20,000 will be paid for by the housing association,
right, okay,
even though they only own half the property in that
yeah,
equation I did earlier. Okay.
okay, that's
The
interesting. So,
hold gives you that real flexibility around
yeah, so
security around major repairs and maintenance on an older property.
So, for example, my neighbour's, the house next door is for sale at the moment. If I decided that I wanted to buy that for my disabled son or daughter, I could then go, actually, this would be perfect. If that also was what they wanted, they might not want to live next door to their mum, you never know. But if they decided they did, then actually we could apply through the hold scheme as long as we had a
Correct.
hefty deposit to buy that, or the numbers worked and it
Correct,
happened to
that's
be
it.
magically 160 to buy. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So if
But
you were in an
also,
area where actually you could buy a property for 160, you could get it all under the hold scheme, or would you still have to put a deposit forward, David?
yeah, you still have to put a deposit because the maximum mortgage is 100, and the deposit towards that element of the mortgage is about 5 or 10%. So that's either
Right.
five to £10,000 for a deposit towards
Right.
100,000. So you still
Okay.
need that. And in that example that you've given, we've got probably we've helped about 1,600 people with this model over the last 20 odd years. It sounds like a lot, but over 25 years, it might be 10 a week or something. It's
Yeah.
not 10, sorry, 10 a month or something. It's not.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's still 10 people who are in
It's not
homes.
huge numbers,
Yeah.
but we've got probably two or three people who have bought properties. I can only think of one offhand who bought next door, but I can think of probably another three or four who have bought properties in the same street as mum
Mm.
and dad.
Mm.
So they can actually do that, and that gives and the parents just love the fact that they can be going to the shops and just pop in to
Yeah.
see their son or daughter, and
Yeah.
without having to travel, and it's the son's
Yeah.
house as well, and that's the important thing. It's they're in control of that property, so they allow mom and dad to come in if they want to.
Yeah. Yeah. They have the control, and that's.
Absolutely,
Do you
absolutely.
struggle to get housing associations to get involved in this? Is that
Yeah, we
as
hold.
well?
Yeah, with shared ownership, you've got loads and loads of housing associations all over the country doing thousands of those properties.
Hmm.
With hold, it's ever so difficult. Lucky in the southwest, we up to Exeter. Really lucky in the southwest. You've got advanced housing, and they've been supporting this model for 26, 27 years,
Right.
and to think that they've done probably best part of 900, maybe best
Okay,
very
that's
close to
good.
1,000 of these properties
Yeah.
now. And then we've got other smaller housing associations dotted around North Yorkshire's Broadacres, Shropshire, it's Reeking Housing, and then you've got a few other smaller ones as well. So not many people supporting it, and it's a shame really because it's a really good model.
Mm.
It works. When I say
Yeah.
it works, the housing associations who've done hundreds of these and done tens of these all say it works really well in terms of viability.
Mm.
And, and,
Mm.
and you're helping people who have got limited options now, which
Yeah.
is always a good thing.
So there are some areas of the country that aren't served with this.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say if you ask me to give you a rough map of the country, I would say the south right up to the Midlands, to the Midlands, Birmingham, a little bit beyond that. Well covered for hold. Thereafter, very difficult. And in the Midland, in the south of the country, Sussex isn't covered, and we don't do London. There's no hold providers in London. We used to have a couple of hold providers previously in London, but not now.
That's
So some
frustrating.
areas of the country,
Yeah.
it's only shared ownership. That's
Yeah, it's
available.
really frustrating that they're not sort of incentivized to do it somehow by the government or something to make it because it's such a good model. Yeah, yeah. David, thank you so much for explaining those two models. Is there anything else we need to say about the hold scheme? Is there anything else positive or negative we need to talk about that we've missed on either
Yeah, I
of
think so. I think what I would say to parents and family members who are looking at this model, bear in mind, buying a house takes a lot longer than renting one.
them?
And so, if they're in crisis, then you solve the crisis. That's your immediate
Hmm.
need. Solve the crisis. And then you look at perhaps home ownership as a longer term solution. That means that perhaps you won't end up in crisis again. Okay, so that's the first thing. The
Mm.
other thing is there's some criteria around mortgages. You'd expect that, and even more so for people with long-term disabilities. So the individuals may not be on the right benefits for this model to work. So again, if you're not sure, pick up the phone, contact us by email, whatever it takes, and do an affordability eligibility test on the phone, so you can do that. And the one that still confounds people, and I smile as I say this, and that is people with complex needs who have limited mental capacity to understand what a mortgage is, they can still have a mortgage. They can still buy their own home. We've been really privileged and lucky to help people who, some of the high profile cases that we've seen at News at 10, and we've been involved with probably a couple of dozen of those where we're finding the solution that they're using to solve some of the challenges they've had previously is hold. And so we think of, Winterbourne View, some of the people that were there when that was shot by Panorama, I don't know, 14, 15 years ago,
Yeah.
used hold as a solution to move back into the community, to be close to friends and family and feel safe. And some of those people are still in their homes today. So we know it works for those. So some of those people with limited mental capacity can buy their own home. But to enable that to happen, you either need you need either lasting power of attorney, and
Hmm.
that's property and finance, or you need a court-appointed deputyship, property and finance. Lasting power of attorney can take 3 or 4 months. Court of protection can take 9 months, 12 months even. So if you're looking at home ownership, then you've got to find a house, then you've got to get a mortgage, then you've got to do all the rest of it with the solicitors. It ain't a quick fix.
No,
It's
no.
only a quick fix. And one tip I would give families, if they were looking to consider the full range of options, is as soon as their sons and daughters and family members become of age or they look like they're going to need housing of some sort, if they need the lasting power of attorney for property and finance or court-appointed deputy, you do it then. You don't wait
Right.
until there's a crisis and then start trying to scurry around to try and get it solved in weeks when it ain't going to happen. So those are some of the challenges, and you need a deposit, and that's the big thing. The last bit I'd say about it as well is some of the cases I'm coming across more recently in the last 4 or 5 years are quite sad, really, because we've come across people who've inherited from family, and an inheritance from the immediate family. Sometimes it's more, it's more extended family, aunts and uncles or grandparents. And as soon as they get their inheritance, and it's above £16,000, that can cause their disability benefits, means tested disability benefits, to collapse and disappear. And they end up having to use the inheritance to then live on and pay the rent as well, because don't forget, rent is a means tested benefit. And they come to us. The one just before Christmas was £60,000 3 years ago, and they come to us and they've got barely enough for a deposit. Just because people
Mm.
weren't aware that they could then have the opportunity to buy their own home because they've inherited money. So
Right.
that's just some of the stuff that you need to.
Really, really useful points there, David. Thank you for sharing those. It's been really interesting to understand how it works better. Thank you for taking the time to explain it. We'll put your contact details and the website and everything in the show notes so people can find those. And thank you for coming on.
No, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you're finding this content useful, then maybe it's time you join the Supported Living Property Network. If you're not already a member, then let me explain what's included. The network is a unique community of property investors and providers coming together to create quality supported living homes. If you're a property investor, you can list property on our portal for our provider members to see. You can access the demand portal where our providers list where they need property, so you can buy property to order. If you're a provider, you can access the property portal to see where our members have property available for you to lease, and you can list where you need property. We do not charge any additional introduction or sourcing fees. You also get access to our monthly training sessions with industry experts to help you understand supported living property and keep up to date. You get access to our monthly online networking sessions to help you connect with property investors and providers. I've written 2 training courses, one for providers and one for property investors, to help you get started in supported living property. We have a membership area filled with resources that you need, where you can watch the previous training sessions too. You get all of this for only £47.50 plus VAT a month. And because we do not want you to stay unless you think it's incredible value, you can leave at any time. Just give us 14 days notice. Simply go to www.supportedlivingproperty.uk. That's www.supportedlivingproperty.uk to join us now.